おや、あなたは何も見ていないですよね。
Hello, it's Alpha here, and today we are taking a look at Cyran. So Cyran is the latest hero added to the AFK Journey. He's a Lightbearer mage with long range of 6, and he has some damaging abilities and some crowd control abilities. Cyran seems to be very PvP focused, and in my opinion he has very interesting kit. I will definitely need to do more testing to know how actually viable he is in the normal arena and the supreme arena, but that will take some time, so I will share my findings so far. This time I'm not going to go too much into detail about his skills. Hopefully you already know what they do, but let me know in the comments if you like the skill explanation part of the videos, then I can probably keep on doing them in the future. So his first ability is just AoE damage, there is nothing special about it. His skill 2 is that Cyran lifts the nearest enemy for 1 second and throws them back to the other enemies. This skill is definitely one that needs more testing, like how useful it actually is, but I mean the skill sounds really nice, it's more crowd control effects, but the one thing that is kind of bad about this skill is that it has really long cooldown. It has 15 seconds of cooldown and it has initial cooldown of 9 seconds, which is really long, and it means that he can only cast this skill for the first time after 9 seconds has already passed, and that means that usually before the 9 seconds is done, he has enough energy to cast his ultimate, so then he will do his ultimate, and then only after doing his ultimate he is able to use this skill for the first time. So I'm not sure like how important part of his kit this is, but obviously it can be nice. It can move someone like Tassi. If Tassi is next to you, he can throw Tassi back to the enemy backline, for example. And then we have the kind of like the interesting part of his kit. So his ultimate summons a black hole that deals damage to all enemies and pulls them toward the center. And it has the potential to execute enemies if they fall low enough on health, but I don't think this execute is that important part of the kit because it's based on like Cyran's attack and the execute threshold is quite small. Then we have his Mythic Plus ability, and with this ability he will cast 3 spells at the start of the battle, so he will do kind of like a weaker version of Enlightening spell, Confining spell, and then Star Shard spell. So out of these 3, the Enlightening spell is definitely, in my opinion, the nicest one. The Enlightening spell gives him 8 seconds of crowd control immunity at the start of the battle and some haste. The Confining spell only stuns one enemy, the rearmost enemy, for 1.5 seconds, so it's quite short stun duration. And then the Star Shard spell does damage to all enemies, but it's a really small amount of damage, and it will reduce their attack speed, but that's only for the first 5 seconds, so I don't think it's that impactful. And then if you upgrade his exclusive weapon to +10, the Mythic Plus ability will also silence the enemy player for 8 seconds so that they can't use the artifact that they have chosen. And this is potentially a really nice effect for PvP. So what are Cyran's strengths? Well, first of all, he has really long range. He has range of 6, so he doesn't have to move a lot on the battlefield. He can disable enemy artifacts, and this can be quite effective. It's kind of hard to say like how good this effect actually is, but for example, you can, even when you are like defending or attacking, if the enemy is using Bonnie, then usually they kind of to some extent rely on using Confining spell to spread the Bonnie's aging debuff. So with the Confining spell being disabled for the first 8 seconds, that will give you some extra time without the Bonnie debuff spreading to your team, so that can be really nice. Cyran can do like decent damage. He has multiple abilities with crowd control effects. He's immune to crowd control at the start of the battle, and he can cast his ultimate really quickly when the battle starts. So what are Cyran's weaknesses? Well, first of all, he's a Lightbearer hero, so that is to some extent the weakness. It makes activating your faction talent on normal arena a little bit harder, but it's not a big downside. He's very squishy. That is probably like the biggest issue that he has. And he has no like defensive abilities other than the crowd control immunity at the start of the battle. So what can happen quite easily is that he will just die to something like Tasi ultimate, like Bonnie aging debuff, Tailins AoE, Tasi's AoE, you know, just the usual suspects when it comes to normal arena. So you have to invest on keeping him alive. And then one of his kind of weaknesses is that most of his power comes from his ultimate ability. But because he can cast it so quickly, he is usually the one that Lily May will interrupt unless you bring someone else to bait the Lily May's ultimate. But then if you're bringing someone else to bait the Lily May's ultimate, you're kind of making your team a bit weaker just by doing that. So all of these weaknesses kind of make building a team around him a little bit harder. So what kind of synergies are there with Cyran? Well, there are potentially quite a lot of different synergies, so that's why testing him will take some time, but here are some of the ones that I could think of. So obviously there is synergy with Aaron and Ulmus. Cyran does magic damage, AoE magic damage, so Aaron and Ulmus will group up all of the enemies and they will reduce the enemy's magic resistance, so Cyran is able to do more damage to them. Then there is the fact that Cyran can disable Enlightening spell, which is usually pretty decent against Aaron. So for example, if the enemy has like a healer at the back with Enlightening spell, then that healer is not as affected by the Aaron Ulmus comp. But now with Cyran disabling the Enlightening spell, that doesn't help them anymore. That being said, Enlightening spell is not really that used artifact on the normal arena anymore. Most people are just using Confining spell anyway, even on defense. So I wouldn't say that the Enlightening spell being disabled is that big deal with most teams, but there are some teams that really want the Enlightening spell, like Dionel teams, for example. But then again, Dionel is not that great when it comes to defense in the first place. So then multiple of Cyran's abilities are like crowd control abilities that can trigger the Ulmus Mythic Plus ability, which extend the crowd control effects. Cyran will also group up enemies for other heroes that you usually run with Aaron and Ulmus, so someone like Carolina or Alsa or Arden. So there is just like kind of like a lot of synergies going on with these heroes. Then there is some synergy with Rainier. I mean, Rainier is not that used on the arena anymore, but he can still be quite effective in some situations. And something that you could potentially do with Cyran is that you could use him with Rainier, and he can't be teleported by the Rainier because of the Enlightening spell that he casts on himself at the start of the battle. So then you can teleport one of the enemies to your team, but then your Cyran won't be moved to the enemy team. So that can be potentially interesting thing to do. There are multiple points of synergy with Bonnie. Cyran deals AoE magic damage, so that will help to spread the Bonnie's aging debuff. Bonnie increases ultimate damage and magic damage, so that will boost Cyran's damage even further. Cyran's Mythic Plus Confining spell should also hit the same target as what Bonnie's aging debuff hits, because they both target the rearmost enemy at the start of the battle. And then Cyran is really good at like spreading the aging debuff with his ultimate, because the ultimate hits the all enemies multiple times. Then there is like some synergy with heroes like Tasi and Tailin, because Cyran can group up all of the enemies, and then your Tasi can, for example, fly in when all of the enemies are grouped up and do a lot of AoE damage. Then there is heroes like Hugin and Rovan. So with Rovan you can make Cyran cast his ultimate instantly, although he can't actually like start his battle with the ultimate, because he casts his Mythic Plus ability spells first and then he can cast his ultimate, but still it's like it takes him about 3 seconds to start casting his ultimate with the help of Rovan. And then with Hugin, obviously Hugin also gives some energy, and then Hugin likes heroes that can stand behind him, and then because Cyran has a range of 6, then they kind of go together well. And Cyran also has ground control immunity at the start of the battle, so enemies can't move him away from the Huggins buff. Okay, so here are some of the team ideas that I've been testing and thinking about. So let's first talk about normal arena attack teams. Obviously, like I said, there is a lot of synergies with Aaron almost type of team, so you can just do something like this. Now, a lot of these heroes in this comp are exchangeable, like you could run instead of Brian, you could do like Nero if you need someone to block the ultimate. Instead of Carolina, you could do Alsa or Arden or Bonnie or whatever. And this team can definitely work when it comes to attacking. But the thing about this is that if you already have a Aaron burst team with some other heroes, then usually that team is already doing its thing when it comes to attacking. So I'm not sure that you would need Cyran just for this purpose. No, it is possible that Cyran is actually better at doing this job than the existing heroes like Carolina or Bonnie. So then if that's the case, then yeah, it would maybe make sense to get him just for this purpose, but that needs definitely more testing to see if he's actually better than some of the existing heroes when it comes to Aaron almost burst team. Then I tried using some of these kind of themes where we are still using Bonnie as kind of like the main damage dealer, and then we are using Cyran to kind of like crowd control enemies and spread the aging debuff. But then we also need to bring someone to tank the enemy team, and we need to bring someone to block the Lily May's interruption. So then these teams were able to win against some like good teams, but I would say that based on like 1 day of testing, I probably did lose more than I won using these types of teams, but it could be just because I haven't done enough testing. But yeah, also part of the reason why he kind of like felt squishy could be that he is only Supreme plus 10. So maybe if I had him at plus 25 exclusive weapon or Paragon 1 or whatever, then maybe he would be able to tank a little bit more, and then it wouldn't be as big of an issue. But yeah, these teams can still definitely work.
Senjou. それは芸術の舞台。
私にか
So then I also tried to make a defense team using him for normal arena. And the idea here is that Igor is gonna be like the main tank at the front, and then you have someone to bait the Lily May's ultimate, so that's the Brian's job. And then you have Bonnie and Cyran at the side, so if the enemy is bringing Aaron and Olmus, the Aaron won't actually hit Bonnie in this location usually. And then Cyran, even if he's hit by the Aaron's ultimate, he is crowd control immunity at the start of the fight. So then that means that both of them should be relatively safe at the start of the battle. But the issue with this team is kind of like, even though it might work like decently well against the burst type team, then it doesn't necessarily work that well against like your typical Bonnie team, because you're kind of making your team a bit weaker by having Brian there. But then if you don't do it this way, then usually your Bonnie will die to the Aaron almost burst. So it's kind of hard to make a team with him that would work in both of those situations. And then I kind of came up with this idea to use him with the twins and then Ludovic and Walker. I think this has been so far like the best performing team when it comes to like testing, but it's a little bit hard to test things on the friendly duel because it's not working exactly the same way as normal arena would. But we did also test this on normal arena and it was working like decently well on normal arena as well. So maybe this is something that you would want to test, or maybe this is like the starting point for figuring out some kind of other team that utilize some of these heroes. The idea here is that this team has like a decent faction bonus because you have like 2 Lightbearers and 2 Graveborn, and then you have Celestial Hypergene, so you get a nice faction bonus. Your Niru will block the Lily May's interruption, and if there is no Lily May, then Niru will obviously start the battle by doing his own ultimate, and then he can do some healing reduction and some healing. Then Ludovic will prevent the twins and Cyran from being bursted at the start of the fight. And then Cyran and Walker has both like crowd control and they can do some decent damage. And then Walker is also there to prevent the Aaron type burst teams from killing your team at the start of the fight, because Walker starts the battle by doing a stun. So even if the enemy Aaron will pull everyone together, then Walker will still be able to stun the enemies as well. And then because your twins are so spread around in this map, if the enemy is bringing Aaron, the Aaron won't be able to hit both of your twins with the ultimate. Once your team kind of like stabilizes after the start of the battle, twins will give everyone haste, and then your Cyran and Walker will start casting their ultimates and hopefully killing the enemy. It is also possible that something like this would work as an attack team, and obviously if you're attacking someone and you know that they are not running Lily May on their defense team, then you can swap the Niru to something more useful. But yeah, this is something that needs more testing on the attack side of things as well.
わかった。全員静かにさせればいいんだね。
笑わせてやる。
分かった。全員静かにさせればいいんだね。
Then I also did some Supreme Arena testing. Not that much, but I will give you some ideas for teams. Obviously, he works well with the Heron Ulmus, even on Supreme Arena, and possibly he's even stronger there because he can be protected by the Wilder faction talents. So you can just do something like this with the typical Heron Ulmus, and then you have like a Carolina with there to do damage. But this team is quite flexible. Instead of some of these heroes, you could use Bonnie, or you could use Lenya, Taylin, Tassi, Niru, Damien, Haven. There are a lot of options, so this is something that you could also do. You could do also Lorsan in this team. But here are some examples that I did on actual Supreme Arena with these teams. Then I also did few tests with Bonnie Greybone hero with Cyran there. And here are few results with this team. So once again we were able to win against like Paragon 3, some Paragon 3 heroes, etc. Even though we don't really have that many Paragon heroes. He can definitely be useful on the Supreme Arena side of things. This was kind of my first impression. I would say that it's kind of too early to know how good he actually is, but he definitely seems like a solid option for your Supreme Arena or normal arena attack teams. But if that's only thing that he is able to do, then he's probably not something that you really need if you already have other options to do those things. But then if he is actually like usable on a defense team as well, then that's where he becomes more higher priority in my opinion.